Hey guys, Urzaban here, recording the first episode of Sum Up, and fair disclaimer, this episode of Sum Up was recorded in front of a live Scopio.
Yeah!
So if you hear him in the background, I'm not taking responsibility for it. Yeah. Fuck that. So anyway, Sum Up is a new series that I came up with where I could basically do like a small, detailed review of an older game that I really wanted to play without allocating all of the resources of a full-sized review of it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right into the first episode of Sum Up with The Evil Within. Okay, now to start the Sum Up of The Evil Within, I wanted to explain my initial interest in the game and why it took me so long to play it. So, when this game came out, I was really excited for it because the creator of Resident Evil finally got away from Capcom and got to make his own independent game, and it came out in 2014. Now, I found myself to buy the Alien Isolation instead because I had more faith in that project and I thought it was going to be a better game, so I went out and bought it first. But at heart, I am indeed a true Resident Evil fangirl, so I knew I would get to this game at some point. So now I finally got into this game, and what do I think about it? I'm kind of disappointed given the creator that it came from. Okay, so beginning with the production of The Evil Within, the best thing I can recommend to any gamer who's even semi-interested in this game still is do not buy it for last gen. The game suffers on last generation. I bought it and played it on my PS3, and I regret doing that. I wish I just paid the extra $2 for the PS4 version and got the much better experience. Now, how the game suffers is you immediately have lower resolutions than you would on next-gen and PC, and then the game's textures are very bland and discolored. Now, on top of that, the game has this constant problem of where the frame rate's constantly messing up, sinking down, and tearing in and out all over the place to try to keep the game running correctly. For the most part, it works without a hiccup, but you will have points in cutscenes and gameplay where the screen will tear a lot and the frame rate will bounce all over the place, either up or down. And that gets to be an issue when you're in very pressing situations and there's a lot of enemies on screen. Now, does it necessarily kill the game that has bad textures and these other issues on last gen? No, but it definitely does hamper the experience when you're constantly looking at this stuff and interacting with it all the time. So if you can, play it on next gen and PC if you have the hardware to do so. If you can't, play it on last gen, but the game suffers greatly because of it. Okay, let's talk about the game's production as a whole. As a whole, I would say The Evil Within is pretty averagely produced in the simple fact that it does what it needs to, never goes above and beyond. Let me clarify. The game's heavily cinematic. I like the cinematic effects. My one major gripe with it that almost ruins it for me is the constant cinematic bars at all fucking times during the game, even in gameplay, which I've heard the smart counter-argument from people on the internet that claim to be smart of, hey Urzaban, this game's supposed to be cinematic. It adds to a cinematic feel. Yeah, I don't care. If it's costing me a third of the screen real estate, I don't want it in the game. You know what? I'll meet you in the middle. The best solution they could have given to both types of mindsets that want the game to be cinematic and the ones that care about gameplay overall, they could have had the cinematic bars come down for the cutscene, then when the gameplay comes back, they go away, and you can see everything. That's just me, though. That's what I would have preferred. Sue me if you don't like it. You know what? Don't sue me. I can't afford a lawsuit. Anyway, moving on. Let's talk about the game's sound design. Sound design, we'll start with voice acting. The voice acting, at best, is mediocre.
It's much more elaborate.
Joseph, are you all right?
Yeah, I'm fine. I think you'd better get down here.
And at worst, cringy.
The stairs are gone.
We must be collectively losing our minds.
Losing our minds. Losing our minds.
Losing our minds. Losing our minds. Losing our minds.
Oh God, no. Rovik, it is you.
Who the hell are you?
No! Don't follow!
Moving forward from that, we have the game's bass sound effects that work for what the game goes for, but they don't go above and beyond, meaning that the game's gun sounds, enemies creeping around and screeching, and like the noises that happen in the game work for the kind of environment you're in, but they don't have any real oomph. Moving forward from that, we have the game's bass sound design. I say that the game's bass sound design is pretty solid overall with the tracks, but the only real track that sat with me for the long haul was A Long Way Down, the game's main theme, which I did like. Unfortunately, if I take this theme and hold it candlestick to a lot of other main themes that I like Transistor's The Spine and Transistor's We All Become One, the Bioshock Infinite, Beast of America, and Resident Evil 7's Go Tell Aunt Rhody, it seems incredibly weak compared to a lot of other game themes that I like. That being said, I still like the song, and it stuck with me, so I count that as a positive. We'll touch on the game's length. Your first playthrough is going to take you roughly 16 to 17 hours on survival mode if you're good at the game. If you're extremely good, you could probably get a little bit faster with a little bit less deaths, but that's the average game time that I got and what I could find for other people. Now, the last thing I want to touch on for the production is the game's horror tone and how it goes about horror. Unfortunately, I would say the horror is just okay in this game on the simple fact that it focuses way too much on trying to jump scare you or having grotesque imagery. That's all fine and cool, but when a game's 17 hours and is a horror game, I would rather it actually change up the horror than just focusing on two aspects of horror, because by the time you get to the halfway point in the game, you're so desensitized to the game's horror to where you actually kind of get upset with it and you can kind of predict how it's going to go. But beyond that, I would say the horror is not bad, it's just overbearing with the two things it's trying to do about 80% of the time. Okay, so cycling right into the gameplay of The Evil Within, let me sum up the gameplay like this. If you've ever played Resident Evil 4, 5, and or 6, congratulations, you've played The Evil Within, you just don't know it yet. Now, I say this because almost every gameplay concept and aspect feels like it was ripped from Resident Evil 4, 5, with the high-octane action sequences of 6. Now, to support my claims, I say this because the gameplay feels almost cut and paste from Resident Evil. It still has the same sluggish third-person shooting and controls. The movement feels the exact same. You're still navigating around traps and fighting off a whole bunch of enemies Resident Evil style. It feels very similar. This also carries over to the enemy types. The basic alter ego enemies feel like the Ganatos from Resident Evil 4. The giants in the graveyard feel like the El Gigantes from Resident Evil 4. The sadist feels like the basic chainsaw guy from Resident Evil 4. It all feels very samey. I'd say the major difference here is that this game's made a bit more clunky on purpose to give the guise of being harder and is a bit more anemic with its ammo drops, which is going to discourage you from doing a shit ton of upgrading in your first playthrough. Now this cycles into the upgrade system. Now to upgrade in this game you need to collect this green brain juice, which you can find all over the place by killing enemies, by doing stealth kills, by defeating boss fights. You basically get the green brain juice everywhere in the game, then you take this juice, collect it, then when you're in the sanctuary area you are able to use it to upgrade your actual character attributes like health and sprint time, your weapon abilities and capacity, and how much gear you can carry out into the field. Now what I recommend doing your first playthrough is upgrading your capacity a decent amount, picking your two favorite guns and upgrading those a fair bit, then upgrading your health and sprint time. That's why I would focus on your first playthrough, because that's going to make it the easiest for you as you play through the game. Now, as you beat the game and do your cycled out playthroughs, you'll eventually become so goddamn badass to where you can basically plow through boss fights just by shooting one rocket at someone, or doing the bare minimum because you're so much stronger at that point. But that's your new game plus, so that's why I recommend doing for your first game playthrough. So overall, let me talk about what I don't like with the gameplay aside from it being the same. The game feels pretty bland and can only really add difficulty to it by giving you an arbitrary stealth section where the enemy can one-hit kill you, or forcing you into a situation where you're in a cramped corner and you're dealing with a whole bunch of enemies or one really strong enemy that can take you down very quickly, and that's the only time the game gains any real difficulty. Then on top of it, the game does have one type of feature that I feel to be very, very gimmicky, and it's the stealth aspect of the game. The stealth feels so goddamn arbitrary by adding the occasional hiding spot from strong enemies or a group of enemies that you're only going to do if the enemy can one-hit kill you, to where it just feels pointless to throw it in. And then the stealth sections are so laughably easy to where you wonder why you're even doing it, just so you can see the same takedown animation over and over and over and over. It feels very, very weak, and the areas are so damn open where you can do this to where if you actually need to cover a lot of distance in sneaking mode, you will be spotted as you come up on the enemy. So it just makes the whole stealth system feel very arbitrary past the beginning point of the game, and then you're gonna forget about it and almost never use it. On top of that, the enemy AI is very stupid, and you can get away with a lot of shit that normally would not fly in any other stealth game. Now, some other negatives that I can add on is the boss fights. I really don't like the boss fights because they feel overly repetitive, and I don't like how they can one-hit kill you in most circumstances. On top of that, a lot of boss fights in this game will get recycled. I remember fighting the Sadist about 3 times in the game, Laura twice, and the Keepers 3 times, and those were the ones that got recycled outside of a few other key boss fights, and then the final boss fight in the game is just a giant scripted sequence, which I really did not care for. That was the gayest way to end the game off for me, was to do that. So moving forward, the gameplay overall is pretty mediocre. It's not bad, but it ain't great, and it's not really going to stick with you for the long haul. Matter of fact, I'm already forgetting aspects of it, and I just played this game about 2 days ago from the time of recording this. So in conclusion, ain't bad, not well polished, and very repetitive. Okay, so let's talk about the story of The Evil Within. I would say this is by far the worst aspect of The Evil Within because it's so damn generic and safe playing to where you can actually predict what's going to happen. On top of it, everything that happens in the story is stupid, and all of the characters in the game are so goddamn bland to where you really don't care about what happens to them. And I say that this is the worst with the main character, Sebastian, and the villain, Ruvik. They are so generic to where you just do not care, and then the only way you find anything about these two characters outside of what's happening on the screen that will actually make you care about their individual stories is by finding audio walks recorded by Ruvik, or finding books that talk about Sebastian's life before he ended up in this mystic dream world. Oh yeah, spoiler alert. Let's move forward. When you get to about the 11-hour mark in the game basically throws in your face, you're really in Ruvik's evil dream world where he's trying to escape using this other guy that got out of the dream world once because he's a perfect catalyst for him to transfer his conscience to, which removes a lot of the real tension in the game because you know none of this is happening. Once I realized this, I realized the best action in the game would be to go find Leslie, shoot him, and then just deal with Ruvik there, and if I die, oh well, Ruvik's still trapped in this shithole. That's essentially the highest the plot gets to, and then the finale is so damn underwhelming where Ruvik turns into your generic Resident Evil 6 boss fight guy, then you do a scripted sequence, deal with him, then you get the ending of the game that's so goddamn open-ended and ambiguous to where I feel like in another 2 to 3 years, we're gonna get an announcement for The Evil Without, or The Evil of the Mind, or The Evil Within 2. Whatever stupid name they go with, I feel like we're gonna have the sequel in another 2 to 3 years with how open-ended the game was and how the game did in sales. I just feel like it's gonna happen. So overall, the story is very bland, has shitty characters that you don't care about that are very one-dimensional, and the plot's just kind of all over the place and has no real effect on you by the end of it, and that's the best way I can describe it. So now, to finish up the first episode of Sum Up, let me go ahead and sum up The Evil Within by summing it up this way, and I've probably just made a lot of people cringe on the internet, but let's keep rolling. The Evil Within amounts from mediocre production value that suffers on last generation especially bad, mediocre gameplay that gets really repetitive, and an extremely shitty story with very bland characters. So overall, with that information, I'm going to give The Evil Within on last generation a 4 out of 10 because it suffers on a technical level badly, and on PS4 and Xbox One and PC, a 5 out of 10 because the graphics and textures and everything runs way better. That being said, overall the game is a rather mediocre experience at best and a rather cringy experience at worst, and never really goes above and beyond the average area. And for the $60 when this game came out, I'm rather glad that I went with Alien Isolation instead, but as it currently sits, it's a fun bargain bin game if you're bored. Anyway, that's my full thoughts on The Evil Within, and this wraps up the first episode of Sum Up. Let me know what you thought of it, and if I should do more episodes of Sum Up in the future. Anyway, have an amazing day and a wonderful life. This is Urzaban, signing off. And here's some audio bloopers, bitch. That being the cinematic bars at all fucking times. Now, I've heard the... the YMCA. And don't get me wrong, it works in the context that they need it to. You actually see what they're going for. It's just very minimalistic. And I would have liked it to have had more finesse and have been spaced out, because it would have had a... What am I even saying? That makes no sense. I'm like saying it doesn't have the effect, but it does have the effect. Now, I guess the natural step to move forward talking from that is the sound design of voice acting. Just gonna cut that one out. We're gonna edit that.
You're gonna draw a line with that one.
Anyway, the natural step to talk to about that is voice acting in the game. Okay, so moving on to the game's production as a whole. I'd say overall the game's pretty averagely produced. Let's talk about the lighting and cinematic effects. Now, the lighting works and it's good in the dark and the environments that are there, but it never goes the extra mile to astound you other than a cool than a... And the textures look way more bland and discolored than they do on, well, fuck. All the words just escapade from me.
That's alright.
So back in 2014, this game came out, and the reason that me and all the other Resident Evil fangirls were overhyping this game and extremely excited for it was because the creator of Resident Evil finally got away from Bethesda. God damn it, I mixed the companies up.